Now, have you ever started a garden project, you worked hard on it, and then realised halfway through that you've made a huge mistake? Well, that is exactly what happened to me with this cottage garden. So I hope to show you how I turned things completely upside down and why it was probably one of the best gardening decisions I've ever made. Well, hello and welcome back to the garden. Today we're spending some time in this area of our garden, which is becoming one of my favourite areas, and it's the cottage garden. And it's starting to really look good now as well. Now we've got the tulips, the daffodils and the hellebores all blooming beautifully at the moment, but believe you me, it has not always looked this good. So today I'll share the whole journey with you. The good, the messy and the mistakes I made along the way, and the essential spring gardening jobs I'm tackling right now in April. We'll also cover topics like managing invasive plants, moving perennials and keeping those weeds under control. So I hope you'll maybe find some inspiration and maybe get a few handy tips for your own garden from this video as well. So let's get to it. I think this cottage garden area has really come to its own, and it will only keep getting better as the time goes on and as the plants will continue to settle in more. As this area is one of the newest that I've been working on. As you see now in early spring, the daffodils and hellebores are flowering so beautifully, and the tulips are just only starting to flower now. These were Farmer Gracie varieties of double mix and pride mix, and what I am seeing I am really happy with. They are beautiful colours and the stems are nicely upright. A lot of the herbaceous perennials are starting to wake up. You can see their neat little clumps growing and pushing themselves out of the soil as the weather is warm at the moment. Now there are actually plenty of slugs around this area, but somehow this delphinium or larkspur actually has managed to stay intact. Yeah, now is the perfect time to just get those quick few jobs done, and later you could have more of a hands-free approach to gardening, or you could just enjoy the space and the plants a little bit more. So as I said, the area here did not used to always look like this. There were some plants growing in the top corner just in front of the hedge, likes of the hydrangea and forsythia, stilbit and persicaria. All of those plants are actually still here, but because of the strong winds coming up here from the valley, these plants did not really like it, or they survived but they didn't thrive. And I suppose the area itself sort of lacked a little bit of a purpose for ourselves as well. We weren't using it. There was no need sort of for us to come here. Obviously we would have had the rose garden and then the kitchen garden we were developing this, but just this corner here, there really was no purpose to it. As we already have hornbeam hedges surrounding the rose garden and creating a good windbreak for the orchard here as well, I actually transplanted a young hedge of the same to create another, like a windbreak essentially. And as this actually then created a proper garden room, which I first thought of making into another rose garden, but maybe in a less formal style. Well, I knew for sure that there had to be flowers in this space. I spent quite a bit of time and effort on measuring out a circular planting area in the middle of this space. I added a lot of fresh compost and horse manure, and I even planted bare root roses in here. And then I just put a stop to it as I didn't like it. What I had just created just did not feel right to me. I think I left it like that for the first 6 months or even more, and I did not add more plants to it. I did not remove anything from it. I just covered it up with black plastic and tried to ignore it, as I was hoping a better idea how to fix it will come to me. And then I realized I actually had been considering the space all wrong, as what I really wanted was not to be looking in at the plants. I wanted to be amongst them. I wanted to be surrounded by flowers. And that's where the cottage garden and having more even spring flowers idea came from. So growing plants that are useful for the pollinators and butterflies, as I already have buddleia here, so I knew that butterflies like to be in this area. They were happy in this space. So my solution was to flip it upside down. What used to be the walkways will have to become planting areas and vice versa, without touching the original plants here in that top corner. And I first added the footpaths in front of the hedges. Like, these were actually needed for maintenance anyway, but once they got covered with wood chips, that eliminated the need to cut grass as well. The next step was to dig out the roses and scrape off as much of the new compost mix as possible, so I could reuse it in the new planting areas. I didn't want to waste any of that. I'd say for the brief couple of months, the whole area looked like a proper mess. It was muddy, the clay soil was hard to work with, the stones mixed in with the clay made everything so difficult. The digging in it was so hard. I could go on and on and on, honestly. It was not easy. I think if I didn't have my spring gardening enthusiasm and the vision of what I really wanted to create at the time, I would have just got so overwhelmed by it all, and I would have easily walked away from it. But I did get through it. The outline was set, and by May last year, more and more plants were added. And obviously I have other areas of the garden that are also looking for constant attention, especially the kitchen garden during summer and autumn. So I could not put all of my time and effort to this space either. But as I'm looking at this space, especially now in spring from the decking area, through the rose garden, and I can see the cottage garden in the distance, the colours of the tulips and daffodils just shining through the hedges because they're not in full leaf yet. It makes me so happy. It is just perfect. The whole idea of the circular space in the middle and planting all around you, it is just perfect. And I would still need a bench in this space, about maybe this area, so I can really look down this vista through the rose garden back into the kitchen garden. It looks just stunning. I can imagine how nice this will look. So here I am again, 2 years later, in spring, in April, and making a few more changes. So what needs to be done with plants in here, you might ask, especially in spring? Well, the very first job is to get rid of the weeds. Those deep taproot perennial weeds. I have dandelion, stock, but also the spreading ones like the nettles and creeping buttercup. These weeds can become very invasive fast. The smaller they are to remove it, the easier it is. If you have herbaceous perennials with thick and heavy foliage that dries over winter and covers the soil like me, then these are the best to gather up as well. I have Crocosmia, Astilbia and Persicaria dry stems here, but there are plenty of more weeds hiding amongst them. One of the biggest decisions I took this year was to remove all Yarrow or Achillea plants from this space. I had only planted them last year. They were propagated seedlings of my plants in the fruit tree guilds, but within the last 6 months they have spread way too much. they were not getting out of control this fast in the fruit tree guilds. And that was the reason why I even considered adding them to the cottage garden here. And previously, I know myself that I've always found ways to hold on to plants, or I always try to make excuses why I can't quite get rid of something. Then this time I was, my mind was made up. No bullies were allowed here. I will rather replace them with other plants that behave better than face dealing with an ornamental plant that behaves like a weed in this space. I don't need that extra work. I don't need that extra aggro in my life at the moment. And as I ended up removing some quite sizable clumps of the yarrow, I left a few holes behind. And there was actually a coral peony seedling that did not make it, but this just gave me an opportunity to rehome another peony, a Shirley temple peony that I had growing in the rose gardens, a large planter. Now this comes with a warning, this is not the best time to transplant peonies. Autumn would be ideal, but this is a young plant. I had given it a good amount of fresh compost as well, and I also planted it a little higher than the rest of the soil level is at the moment. But that's just only because the root run is not deep in that spot. There are a lot of stones on the ground. And what I'm thinking is that I can add even more soil to the surface and bring the levels up around the plant more. pink flowering plant, or rather plants, are not something I intentionally planted here. They seem to have come as seeds, perhaps with the actual plant I bought that I had planted in that location. And it does look a bit like red campion, which is a native flower. The pollinators seem to like it, but it is too tall just to be in the front of the border, so I'll try to move it further back. Now, as it is in full flower and the foliage is also very soft, it might not like the move, but if it survives, then fine. If it doesn't, then it's no loss to me, really. Another problem plant I have in this space is a Crocosmia lucifer. That it has spread further than it originally was planned for, and B, with all of the new plants that I've already now added, this Crocosmia's sort of orange flower tones are not complementing the rest of the red, pink mauve tones that I have going on. So it just, for the sake of those two main reasons, it does need to come out. Plant itself is very striking when it's in full flower, but it spreads by self-seeding very easily, and then the corms form on the ground and are well rooted and not that easy to pull up at all. So it is especially difficult to dig up when it has managed to spread itself amongst this combination of Persicaria and Dicentra. Now, I'm not afraid to lose a bit of either of those plants, so the only way I can see to get to the roots is to literally just chop the plants apart. I use gloves most of the time when gardening, but in this case it is necessary because Dicentra, commonly known as the bleeding heart, is poisonous, especially its roots. So do be careful when handling this plant yourself, or when you have pets that might try to eat it, or small children playing in the garden and you have that planted somewhere. So just to be warned, it is poisonous. Now, honestly, after all that, I was exhausted by this point. But the other clump of Crocosmia, which had nestled itself under the large hydrangea, I had to call for my hubby's help. I was way too tired to be able to even get the spade into the ground, never mind digging all of those corms out. But luckily, he obliged and helped me out with this. So no doubt I will still have more baby plants appearing for years to come, but now I will treat them as weeds and remove fully. And all of those will go to the burn pile, as I don't want this Crocosmia to become invasive in other areas. Yeah, you can leave them like that, I can gather them up. there is still a large area of creeping buttercup and nettles just at the very back there to deal with, but I have just covered most of it with black plastic sheet for now. The vigour just needs to be knocked out of them before I can dig them out and tidy that area up. So plenty more to do still. There you go, the cottage garden all spring cleaned and ready for the new growing season ahead. And it's really funny to look back and realising just how much things can change with a bit of determination and stubbornness, and I definitely have stubbornness in me. But honestly, seeing those flowers blooming now, it's worth all of the hard work for sure. But let me know in the comments if you've ever completely changed your garden plans like this. I'd love to hear your stories too. And as always, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.